COVID, long haulers, pregnancy. How did I get here and what's the story? Why is it that I shared with you that in pregnancy, my long hauler symptoms started to get better? Okay, so last video, I announced that I'm pregnant. That was at 23 weeks. I am now 24 weeks. And I told you that I had COVID. There have been so many questions about this, so I want to answer your questions and give you a little bit of the backstory. So it was the end of March of 2020 that I start having shortness of breath. I chalk it up to, I'm just getting old and I'm probably out of shape. These are like the things that we do, right? I'm having shortness of breath and it's gradually creeping on until one day I really can't breathe, I can't get out of bed on my own, and I pass out on the way to the bathroom. I had no fever and I had no cough. To me and everyone else, we were like, well, this can't really be SARS-CoV-2 because you don't have all of the signs and symptoms. So I want to remind you, this is very early 2020. That's going to matter a lot in this story. So I go to the hospital. I call 2 friends who are ER doctors. I don't want to go to the hospital. They both convinced me to go to the hospital, kind of. One had to actually get on the phone with my husband and be like, yes, take her to the hospital.
I haven't been able to breathe for 7 days. And today is much worse.
I get all the testing done. It comes back that I do, in fact, have COVID. I have chest x-rays, I have CT, I have everything done, the whole gamut. And at that point, they are like, we can't put you on a ventilator because your lungs aren't so bad. And it's really best if you go home and take care of yourself with everything you've been doing. So we reviewed my supplements with them. They're like, you need to get sleep and you need to eat good food and you need oxygen. So we're sending you home with oxygen. I had a home pulse ox as well. So, which was not doing very good at that time or for several months afterwards. So I go home on oxygen and I have an at-home oxygen unit, which I figure I'm going to probably be on this for like a week. I'm going to recover. Instead, I end up declining more and more and more. And I'm on the phone regularly with my doctor, getting on webcams, can't really speak, having to type a lot because I can't breathe or catch my breath enough. And I get started on HCQ, again, early 2020, not something that I'd recommend. It really did nothing but make my heart palpitations so much worse. So I was on HCQ, Z-Pak, and zinc. And that was something where people were like, you're gonna turn around in a matter of days. I did not turn around in a matter of days. In fact, it was really 3 weeks in that it didn't seem like I was gonna die anymore. And my pulse ox was a lot more stable. I wasn't dipping super low. And I thought I should be recovering by then. But what came up in my COVID journey was really confusing to me, a lot of people, and it brought a lot of scrutiny at the time because I didn't have the typical symptoms. In fact, I went on to develop neurological symptoms. I had trigeminal neuralgia, so you basically like get 3 points of shooting pain across your face. I had migraines. Last time I had migraines, I was on the pill. I haven't had migraines since, so I was getting severe migraines, shooting pains throughout my body. My fatigue was unbelievable and I couldn't stay oxygenated despite my lungs looking great. I was a bit of an anomaly at the time. Then, came the long haulers crew or the post-COVID syndrome crew and more people talking about it. And what I had identical to what other people were experiencing. These burning red eyes, nobody was talking about that. I never lost my sense of smell or sense of taste. I didn't get that fever and cough until a couple of months in. At one point that I had that, there were a lot of things that were unknown about my condition that even had me second guessing, do I even really have this, or is this in my head? Until I found a long haulers group and started talking with thousands of people who were having the same experience as me. Having days where the most you could do was really sit up in bed. And then having days where you're like, I actually feel good. I can move around. And then 3 days later, you have 3 days where you just feel awful. So I really kept thinking like this will be over any day now, any day now. And then it became more and more apparent that like I really had no idea when this was going to be over. Now, what's important about my story is that I never lost my period and I never stopped ovulating. And there were times where I actually felt better in my cycle, and that was really leading up to ovulation. So I track my cycle. I have done that for a very long time. I know when I ovulate, it's very predictable. And I noticed I would feel better around ovulation. So my estrogen and testosterone were rising. And then I would feel worse right before my period, and I would always have a setback. And that makes sense given that my hormones were falling and I didn't have some of the same protection that those hormones offer. So this is a little window into like what may have happened. So with this, I just found it very interesting. I was tracking all of this. There are lots of women who have reported losing their period, losing, ovulation. So they're losing their period, losing their fertility through their COVID journey. And that didn't happen for me, fortunately. And at the same time, though, there were lots of questions being raised of like, are we going to be infertile? Like, is it possible that this virus could render you infertile? So very specifically, having the viral infection and catching it. With getting severely sick, it's not abnormal to lose your period or to, stop ovulating. And I want you to understand that when I'm saying lose your period, stop ovulating, it's because those two really go together. You stop ovulating, then you lose your period. If you are not ovulating because you are taking something like the pill, then you're not going to lose your period because you're going to always have that medication-induced withdrawal bleed. So I just want to parse that out so it makes a lot of sense. So through this journey, I start to identify like this severe fatigue, everything that's going on, that I need to have mitochondrial support. I'm going to do a whole video about this. I know I talked about my fertility protocol, the mitochondrial support in the last video. Make sure you subscribe if you want to catch that video. That way you don't miss it. I know there's a lot of questions about this. But the other thing is that because of the cyclical nature of my symptoms, that they were really following my entire cycle in terms of the ebbs and flows, this really started to look autoimmune to me. And at the time, there was no research saying that like, yes, this is autoimmune, but I started to approach it as if it was, and doing, things, bringing things like vitamin D, not just for fighting an infection, and supporting the immune system. Yes, that's great. Yes, there's studies on that. But also looking at that autoimmune component and how do we really balance the Th1 and Th2 response. So it wasn't until October that a study came out and showed that, lo and behold, there is a small portion in this study. So there is a subset of the people who get COVID who have it severe and have long haulers. Now, this makes sense because as I talked about in my other video, I don't have cardiovascular disease, I don't have diabetes, I don't smoke, none of those things, okay? So like back in, remember, beginning of 2020, all the things that like we thought like were, gonna make you, high risk, I didn't have any of those. But I do have an autoimmune condition. And so this is what made the most sense. In October of 2020, this study comes out showing that there are people who are predisposed to having a severe COVID response, so a severe infection, and going into long haulers. And it has to do with COVID actually activating autoantibodies against your own interferon. So interferon is like a chemical messenger that rolls around and goes through the body, and it's like, we have a problem, get the immune system to mount an attack, and really sounds the alarm. And this may explain why I didn't have a fever and I didn't have some of those symptoms that we would have expected. With that, this all is really important for why is it that I shared with you that in pregnancy, my long hauler symptoms started to get better. So they were improving. There were definitely things improving, like the brain fog that I had initially. At the time that we decided to get pregnant, I had already really just come to terms with the fact that some things were probably never going to get better, that I probably was going to struggle with exercise intolerance, and it was going to take a long time to get back from that. That I was going to struggle with migraines, and those might be with me for the rest of my life. And so this was something I kind of made peace with. Now, in my last video, I told you that at about 6 weeks of pregnancy, my symptoms really started to subside and go into remission. So that's not 6 weeks from, my last menstrual period. That is 6 weeks of pregnancy. So your last menstrual period, that's about roughly 2 weeks before you ovulate. So this would have been 8 weeks of pregnancy if you're going by your last menstrual period, but really like 6 weeks. Now, what happened? What changes in pregnancy? This lends itself further to my hypothesis of autoimmunity, and that's what affected me. I can't say that's what affected you or like the thousands of other people who are struggling with similar symptoms, at this point, hundreds of thousands of people. I can't say that that's exactly what happened for them, but I want to explain to you why it matters what was happening with my cycle, and then what matters, what changes in pregnancy. When you become pregnant, you'll often hear people saying, oh, your immune system gets downregulated. This is not true. That's an oversimplified explanation, and it's not actually what's happening. What's happening is that your immune system shifts to have more tolerance for baby. So your immune system is very good at saying, this is you, this is not you, destroy not you. At least it should be. If you have autoimmunity, it gets confused. Baby is not you. Baby is genetically baby, okay? So baby is genetically unique. Baby is not you. If your immune system was hyped up to that with a Th1 response, your immune system could attack and destroy baby. That's just not a good idea for the future of a species. So your body, being really wise, shifts you into Th2 dominant state. So we've got, really, this is oversimplification as well, but we've got two aspects of our immune system. Th1, which is about viruses and bacteria. That's everything you need to fight something like COVID. But you have Th2, which really evolved for parasites, but we see it more for allergies, asthma, eczema these days. When you become pregnant, you shift away from that Th1 into a Th2 state. This is why pregnant people can be a lot more susceptible to catching the flu or becoming sick with other infections, or even food poisoning, is because that Th1 that's been downplayed a bit while Th2 comes up, and that's in order to keep baby safe. So it may very well be that what happened with COVID and me is that it was autoimmune that was leading to these long hauler syndrome symptoms. I was working to put it into remission. So when I became pregnant, my immune system shifted into Th2. We didn't have a Th1 driven autoimmunity going on. That may be very well why I began to feel better. I joke with my friends, that the secret to long haulers is getting pregnant. Let me be really clear. That's not a reason to get pregnant though, but it is something that has helped me tremendously in feeling better. So does this mean that I'm cured and it's gone forever? That is a big unknown, because it may very well be that when I deliver baby and then subsequently my placenta, I'm not going to have that same hormonal protection that I have right now. My hormones are going to drop, and my Th1 is going to come back online. We see autoimmune flares following birth and in the postpartum period. I may very well have an autoimmune flare of my own. I have a history of Hashimoto's. I'm going to do everything I can to monitor and correct that. And I know you want a video on that, so one is coming. Just make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. But the other piece of this is that I may very well experience those same symptoms from long haulers, and they may come back. I will be very honest with you, and I will keep you up to date if that does in fact happen. I'm kind of like a walking experiment right now, because the reality is I can't stay pregnant forever. Although I really wish, I'm like right now at 24 weeks, if I could just stay 24 weeks and do that for a year, that would be spectacular. Turns out I don't set the clock, and baby don't care what I want to do. So for those of you who love to see the bump, here it is at 24 weeks in all its glory. Many requests from you guys to actually show my belly more often. So that's for you. I promise to keep updating on Instagram and sharing this journey with you, because I know that this is really unique. And for me, when I was struggling a lot, hearing other people's stories helped me so much in terms of not feeling alone, but also just having something tangible. Now, I would love to hear from you. If you have questions specifically for me, drop them in the comments. Yes, I'm gonna talk about the fertility protocol for myself, for my husband. I'm gonna be answering a lot of your questions, but this is really guided by you. I'd also love to hear if you've had COVID and what your experience has been like. Did you get pregnant easily afterwards? Have you found that there were changes in your hormones, your body, your fertility after having it? I would love that the comment section could really become a place for us to be supporting each other, sharing our stories. And if you follow me, you know something that I've been saying for years is that it's important that we share our stories, because we never know who is going to be healed or know that healing is possible through our stories that we tell. And when we tell our stories, it's also healing and insightful for us as well. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate your support. My family and I have read all of your well wishes and congratulations for my pregnancy. And it just really is so touching. And I really appreciate you. So thank you so much for watching this.